Thank you, Chair. Minister, I'm so glad you're so passionate about regional rail and how you consider that everyone in the regions, including the great northwest of this state, deserve regional rail. Any plans to investigate the viability of bringing back a Mildura even to Maryborough train? We're not talking about who got rid of it. This is budget estimates looking to the future. I would suggest that it would be much more cost effective for, and it would solve the sadness of so many kids that are missing out on their free public transport in the Great Northwest.
Have you guys announced it?
Eyewitness, thank you.
Look, I know you don't want to dwell too much on the end of the passenger line rail service in Mildura, which I think last ran in September 1993. I'll let you do the political maths on who was governing at that time. Look, there are currently no plans at this point in time. I can't speak to future plans in this particular forum. But we know that the Mildura rail line continues to be a really important freight route. I know you're aware of that more than anyone else. It carries about 500,000 tonnes of containerised freight and bulk grain per annum, and we know how important that is, particularly economically, in supporting jobs and regional economies in the Sunraysia and Mallee regions. Look, I know that this is one of many local issues for you that is particularly close to your heart, and we've got big plans across regional Victoria. I've spoken to some of those and how we're boosting uplifts across our state, and our bus services in some of those regions that aren't serviced comprehensively by rail become even more important, and I'm keen for us to be making sure that we're continuing to be able to deliver those uplifts too in regional communities.
Imagine the uplift if you brought back Mildura, but we'll move on because I have got so many questions for you about regional rail and not much time. The budget press release about the $270 million that was the 20th of May to deliver a more reliable rail network for regional Victorias with maintenance and upgrades. What are you doing differently this year compared to last year that it requires its own line item for maintenance?
I think this goes to, and Warwick might want to speak to this because this effectively goes to our investment in V-Line. We have consistently, I believe, invested to make our regional rail services more reliable. I mean, that goes to part of the work in the regional rail revival works and upgrading the line.
Sorry to interject, is any of it platform upgrades or lengthening? If it's
No, it's maintenance.
It's just maintenance.
It's largely maintenance, and of course there's also things that work in with this, like when we look at like one particular issue that we've had more recently on our V-Line network that's caused significant disruption has been a growth in increase in kangaroo strikes. I know this. Like
what? Many kangaroos? They're too big.
Well, and the drought has basically caused a bit of a change in animal behaviour, which is seeing more interactions of train and tram, but a train and animal, which is where like things like our biowash facilities and upgrading those, and we've got a new one coming online in say South Dynon, which will allow us to get carriages back up on the network more quickly, become really important complement.
Yeah, but isn't regular maintenance, isn't that regular recurring funding? But it's got its own line item this year, which is different to previous years. So isn't that regular ongoing funding?
Warwick, would you like to speak to the maintenance profile, what that goes to?
Sure. So the $270 million that you're referring to is, I think, is the sustainability line. So that's the additional regional rail revival program works that are continuing to date, and they will then be turned on so that we can operate and maintain the additional services, maintain the assets for those additional assets coming online.
Are they the Melton and Wyndham Vale lines? Which lines are they?
So the Warm Ponds duplication project was completed last year. The Gippsland line upgrade is due to be completed this year. The Shepparton line upgrade again on track for this year. So it's to maintain those new assets that are coming on board.
Okay. Yeah. The new velocity trains that are on the budget on page. This is the performance statement on page 139. The velocity trains that are spoken about. Are any of those going to be used on lines outside of the Melbourne area, or are they extra units for the overcrowded Melton and Wyndham Vale line services? Because they haven't been electrified yet.
Velocities are on every line, yeah. Velocities are on every line except Swan Hill.
Every line except Swan Hill. Okay.
So maybe if I
Currently.
just add, Ms. Benham, so the addition, we have an order of 23 new Velocity trains. We're now seeing those come onto the network. They were made a couple of years ago. They will boost the existing services, but we're now running Velocity trains all the way from Wodonga through to Warrnambool and all parts of our network. The remaining part to do is the Swan Hill section, which we're working on over the coming years.
And is there a plan for that? Do we know when that's expected?
Work on
So 130 Velocity trains are on the network. The 130th came on last week, and there's another 11 trains to go.
11 to go, yeah.
But the Swan Hill line, you don't know when that will start taking Velocity trains?
We don't have a committed time for that yet.
No, not a time frame yet.
Speaking of Swan Hill, though, that currently stops at Dingy, and this is getting back to the platform issue in a lot of regional stations. That currently stops at Dingy and Heathcote Junction on the Seymour line, in fact, because the trains are too long for the platforms themselves, so only the first few carriages are able to be used, which is awful for overcrowded carriages. If these services are used in this way for the platforms, why is it done this way? Are we exploring any other more innovative ways to board and unboard on these lines rather than push everyone to the front?
Yeah, well, yes, we're always exploring innovative ways to use those lines. Obviously, as a part of our ongoing upgrade works, we look at opportunities to, say, lengthen platforms where it's appropriate to do so, and that's been a feature of, say, the Melton Line upgrade as an example. There are...
Melton Line upgrade?
Yeah, I was saying, where we've got that's just an example of where we take an opportunity when we're doing a whole corridor to say, what can we do to lengthen platforms while we're there? We continue to do that. That's definitely, Sunshine, the Sunshine Works are stage 1 of Melton electrification, and that's that's a really important step forward in that project. I could wax lyrical about the Sunshine Works, but I won't, because I know that you won't appreciate me for doing that when you're...
Not with 45 seconds.
No. When you're asking about sort of innovative operational models, the answer is yes. I believe we deploy some of those on, I think it's the Bendigo line, on some services. We're always looking at ways that we can do that. There are some sort of accreditation and rail safety considerations there for us to get effectively authorisation to be able to do that by ONSA. So we need to make sure that whatever we do is kind of falls within that regulatory landscape, but those are active conversations and planning that we are doing day in, day out to make sure that we're doing everything on our network to get more passengers on and as safely as possible.
So why cut back the train length on shorter platforms like Warrnambool?